Hello, I'm Debbie from So Easy, and in this tutorial we're going to have a go at sewing the gathered front t-shirt. So cutting out the pattern and the fabric is all taken care of already. So these are just the sewing instructions, and we're going to start on the center front panel, and there are some circles drawn on the pattern here and up at the top just here, and we need to gather between these two areas. So I've just added a little snip in the edge of my fabric here, so when I take my pattern off I can see where these gathering marks are. So let's get the pattern ready for the piece ready for some gathering. Okay, so I can see where my little snips are and I know where I need to gather. So I'm just going to run a long line of long length basting stitches between these two snips, and then I can gather up just very slightly. So I'll set my machine to its maximum stitch length and just do a regular running stitch along here, and then I'll come back to you. Now I've got my front side pieces, two opposite pieces of fabric just here, and it's going to be the side with the curve which is going to attach to the gathered side, and I need to put them right sides together. So I'll need this piece and my curve will fit like that. So I'm just going to start by pinning at the bottom. So I'll match this bottom hem just here, and I'll pin until I get to the point where my gathering stitches start, and then I need to take the other point here and I will match that to this point here on the pattern, and I will pin again just a short distance here until I get to the top of the gathering stitches. So now I've laid it with the gathering stitches on the top, and the piece with the curved part of the bust, the pattern piece for that, is flat underneath, and of course this gathered part is now much longer. So I'll just take the bobbin thread just here and gradually move up the gathers until the length of the gathered fabric is going to match the length of the curve underneath. So it'll take me a little while to gather that up enough. And when I'm doing it, I want to make sure that I'm going to try and distribute the gathers quite evenly. So I'll keep moving them up as I go, and then I'll get an idea of how much is still needs to be gathered. So do take your time with this, because the gathers on the front of the top are going to be the focal point. So you really want to make sure that it looks nice. So now I can see that I've over gathered it. That's just fine. I'm going to make sure my gathers go all the way to the other end, and then I'll just try and even them out and loosen it a little as I go until it matches the length underneath. Okay, I have a little bit more loosening to go. Lovely. And once I've got my length about right, all I'm going to do now is just pin with these raw edges together, and I'll just fluff with my gathers as I go, make sure that I've got them evenly spaced, and I'll pin all the way around this curve. Okay, so my pinning's completed. This side of the top is pinned right from top to bottom, and my gathers here are all nice and evenly spaced. So now I'm going to sew in one line all the way from top to bottom using a 5/8 of an inch or 1.5 centimetre seam allowance, and as I go over these gathers I'll just smooth them out and make sure that nothing is puckered and everything is going to look good. Okay, I'll come back when that's done. Okay, my seam's completed. Remember, when you're sewing seams on stretchy fabrics, to always make sure you use an appropriate stitch. If you're using a stretch fabric, you'll need a stitch which is going to stretch too, so that your stitches don't break when you wear it. Okay, so everything's looking good here. Now we either need to remove this line of basting stitches, or you can trim and neaten these seams. I'm just going to cut my seams down by about half, and then I'll just overcast them, and when I do that it'll probably just cut these basting stitches away anyway, so the gathering will be removed. Let's have a look from the outside. Okay, so we've got a nice smooth finish on one side, and we've got our gathers down the other side. That's looking very good. So once I've trimmed that seam and neatened it, we now need to move on to just add the other front panel. Exactly the same as before. I'm going to pin this seam to this one. Now you can see obviously that one seam curves one way and one seam curves the other, but if your fabric has plenty of stretch, that shouldn't be a problem. However, if you do run into a problem with these curves, you can just snip the very edges of these curves a little bit to help your fabric move around. Okay, so I'll pin and stitch that, and that will then be our front panel completed. So this is our front panel now completed, our centre part here with the gathers and the two side panels. Now I'll have to do exactly the same now for the back. You'll have a centre back, but it doesn't have any gathering, so it's just plain, and you fit in your side panels into the back using the curves towards the centre and forming an armhole here on the outside. So complete that now for your back with your centre panel and your two side pieces pinned and stitched in, and then we'll have a look at joining the two together. So if you've done plenty of sewing before, then how to complete this top is going to be no mystery to you, and you can just carry on. But if you haven't done so much sewing, then sometimes when you come to sewing things like sleeves and necks, sewing them in the round can be a little bit more difficult. So we'll just have a look to make it easy and sew as much as we can as possible what's called in the flat. So we're just going to join one shoulder seam, and you can do one or the other, it doesn't matter, but as long as you put the two right sides together, pin and then stitch, and use your 1.5 centimetre or 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and just stitch one shoulder, and then we'll have a look at stitching armholes and the neck hole in flat and finishing them off later on. So do one shoulder for now, and then we'll come back. So my one shoulder is now sewn, which means the other is open, and you can in fact open the top all the way out to make one great big arc like this for the neck. And if you're new to sewing, you'll probably find it's easier to turn the neck this way while one side is still open. So you need to turn over to the inside a seam allowance, so 1.5 centimetres or 5/8 of an inch. Just match up at the shoulders and then turn all the way and pin. And then once you have everything pinned, just run a line of stitches around here, just catching the inside edge of the fabric that you've turned, and that will be the neck taken care of. And then if you switch it around the other way, the armhole here is open, and do exactly the same here. You turn in 1.5 centimetres or 5/8 of an inch all the way round, and once that's completed, then you have your neck and one armhole sewn, and then we'll come back. So once the neckline and that first armhole are sewn, take your top right sides together again and match up the other shoulder seam, and then if you pin and stitch this shoulder seam, make sure carefully that you're matching it neatly on the side here of the neck edge, and then once you've done that, you can then go on and sew this other armhole in the flat too. So it saves a lot of difficulty if you're quite new to sewing, to be able to sew these round seams in the flat, and then we'll go and do the side seams later on. So complete your shoulder, complete the turn to the inside for this armhole. Now press this neck and these armhole edges neatly to get a nice smooth finish. And now we need to do the side seams. So join up where it starts under the arm just here, and pin and stitch all the way down to the bottom hemline on either side. And then your top really will be starting to take shape. So you do that on the other side too. Match up under the arms, pin and stitch all the way down to the bottom. And then it's just a case of trying on and seeing if your fit is good. You have lots of seams, both side seams and these princess seams as well down the bodice. So if you need to take in any of the seams a little to give it a more of a fitted shape to match your shape, then you can do that now. So side seams next, then try on and check for fit. And once you're eventually happy with the fit, the final step is just for us to place a hem along the bottom. So turn in your 5/8 of an inch, 1.5 centimetres again all the way round, pin and then stitch. Remember that you'll need to have a nice stretchy stitch on the bottom of your fabric here. So either use a twin needle or a stitch with plenty of stretch that allow you to take your top on and off. And there we are. Your gathered front t-shirt will be completed. I hope you join me for some more sewing lessons and sewing patterns over at Sew So Easy. Thank you.